Have you ever felt exhausted after a day where nothing actually happened? No argument, no emergency, no disaster. And yet, by the time your head hits the pillow, it feels like you've been fighting for your life. That's because, in a way, you have not against the world, against your own brain. Picture this. It's 2:14 in the morning. You're staring at the ceiling. Your room is quiet. Your phone isn't buzzing. Nobody is asking anything from you, but your mind refuses to let the day end. It replays a conversation from this afternoon, then one from last week, then suddenly you're imagining something that hasn't even happened yet. You tell yourself to stop thinking, but your brain ignores you. Sound familiar? Or maybe your version looks different. You walk into work, school, or a party, and before anyone says a word, you're already scanning the room. Who looks annoyed? Did someone glance at you? Why did that person sound different today? Your body reacts before your mind even understands what's happening. Your shoulders tighten, your breathing changes, your stomach knots up. It's like some invisible alarm has already gone off. Here's the strange part. Most of the time, nothing is actually wrong. Nobody's attacking you. Nobody's chasing you. You're simply living another ordinary Tuesday. So why does your body act like it's preparing for battle? Most people think the answer is anxiety, but anxiety is often just the symptom. Something much deeper is happening beneath the surface. Your brain has learned a dangerous lesson. Not that the world is always unsafe, but that it should never stop checking. And once your brain learns that lesson, it starts seeing possibility as probability. A delayed text becomes rejection. A mistake becomes failure. Silence becomes tension. The unknown becomes danger, little by little. Your world doesn't actually become more dangerous. It simply feels that way. And when your brain stops feeling safe, everything changes. Not just the way you think, the way you sleep, the way you work, the way you love, the way you trust, even the way you imagine your future. The question is, how does a perfectly ordinary brain become trapped in survival mode? And more importantly, can it ever find its way back? The answer doesn't usually begin with one traumatic moment. That's what surprises most people. Sometimes it does. A painful childhood, a toxic relationship, years of living in chaos. But just as often, it happens quietly, so quietly that you never notice it happening at all. Imagine a child who grows up never knowing what version of their parent will walk through the front door. Some days there's laughter, other days there's shouting, nothing feels predictable. So the child's brain adapts. It learns to read tiny changes in tone, tiny shifts in facial expressions, tiny pauses in someone's voice. Those tiny observations become a survival skill. Years later, that child becomes an adult. The house is different. The people are different. The danger is gone. But the brain, it's still searching for clues. Not because it's broken, because it got very, very good at one job, keeping you alive. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. Your brain doesn't care whether a fear is old. It only cares whether it feels familiar. That's why people sometimes leave healthy relationships and stay in unhealthy ones. Not because they enjoy being hurt, because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. Even when familiarity hurts, strange, isn't it? The human brain would often rather choose predictable pain than unpredictable peace. Think about that. Have you ever noticed how silence can feel uncomfortable? You finally have a free evening. Nothing urgent. Nothing demanding your attention. Within seconds, you reach for your phone, open social media, check your email, refresh your messages, watch another video. Not because you're interested, because your brain has confused constant stimulation with safety. Stillness forces you to hear thoughts you've been outrunning all day. And for a brain that never feels safe, silence sounds loud. This is why people say they're addicted to being busy. But busyness isn't always about ambition. Sometimes it's camouflage. If you keep moving, you never have to ask yourself why stopping feels so frightening. Now, here's where it gets even stranger. Your brain doesn't only remember events, it remembers emotions. Imagine touching a hot stove. Years later, you don't need to think before pulling your hand away. Your body remembers. Emotional experiences work the same way. Enough criticism, and your brain remembers embarrassment. Enough rejection, and it remembers abandonment. Enough unpredictability, and it remembers that safety can disappear without warning. Over time, those emotional memories become shortcuts. You don't consciously decide to expect the worst. Your brain makes the decision before you're even aware of it. That's why one unanswered text message can suddenly feel enormous. Objectively, it's just a delayed reply. But your brain isn't responding to the phone. It's responding to every unanswered message that ever made you feel unimportant. That's why one small mistake at work can feel like your entire future is collapsing. It isn't about today's mistake. It's about every moment your brain connected mistakes with losing love, respect, or belonging. This is something psychologists sometimes describe as the brain predicting the future using the past. It isn't trying to tell you what's true. It's trying to tell you what kept you alive before. And most of the time, those are two very different things. Here's a question. Have you ever caught yourself preparing for conversations that never happened? Replaying imaginary arguments, practicing explanations in the shower, thinking of the perfect response. Hours after someone already forgot the conversation, it feels irrational, but your brain sees it differently. If I'm prepared for every possibility, I can't be caught off guard. Except there's one problem. Life creates infinite possibilities, which means your brain never gets permission to stop preparing. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket. No matter how much you do, there's always another wave coming. And that's the trap. The more your brain searches for complete certainty, the more uncertain life begins to feel. Ironically, the very thing meant to keep you safe becomes the thing that steals your peace. But here's the twist. This constant state of alertness isn't proof that your brain is weak. It's proof that your brain is incredibly efficient. Too efficient, it learned one lesson so well that it forgot something equally important. Not every discomfort is a danger. And once you understand the difference, everything about the way you experience your life begins to change. So how do you teach a brain that's been preparing for danger to believe it's finally safe? Not by arguing with it, and not by forcing yourself to think positive. If you've ever tried that, you already know what happens. You tell yourself, everything's fine, but your body quietly answers, then why does it still feel like this? That's because your brain trusts evidence more than words. Imagine meeting someone who lies to you every single day. Eventually, you stop believing what they say. Your brain works the same way. It doesn't care how many motivational quotes you read. It watches what you do. Every action becomes evidence. Every choice sends a message. Here's what most people get backwards. They think confidence comes first, then action. In reality, action usually comes first. Confidence is what your brain builds afterward. Think about learning to ride a bike. No one becomes confident before the first ride. Confidence grows because your brain collects proof. I fell, but I got back up. I almost crashed, but I survived. Over and over, your brain updates its prediction. The same thing happens with emotional safety. Every difficult conversation you don't avoid. Every boundary you finally set. Every mistake you allow yourself to make without calling yourself a failure, your brain writes down another piece of evidence. Maybe this isn't as dangerous as I thought. At first, the change is almost invisible. You'll still overthink. You'll still feel nervous. You'll still have moments where your old survival instincts show up. That's normal because your brain isn't deleting the past. It's simply creating a new future to compare it against. Picture walking through a forest. The first time, you have to push branches aside, step over rocks, make your own path. It's slow, frustrating, uncomfortable. But if you walk that same path every day, something changes. The ground becomes smoother. The branches move aside. Eventually, it becomes the easiest path to follow. Your brain builds habits the same way. For years, you've walked the path of fear. Not because you wanted to, because it was the only path your brain knew. Healing isn't erasing that path. It's building a new one until your brain naturally chooses it instead. And here's something almost nobody tells you. Real healing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels boring. Sometimes it feels awkward. Sometimes it feels like nothing is happening at all. Because we've been taught to expect transformation to be dramatic. One breakthrough, one life-changing moment, one perfect morning where everything suddenly clicks. But that's not how the brain changes. The brain changes through repetition. Quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. One day you'll answer a phone call you used to avoid, not because you're fearless, but because your brain has learned that discomfort isn't the same as danger. You'll speak honestly without rehearsing every sentence. You'll make a mistake, and instead of spiraling for 3 days, you'll shrug your shoulders and move on. You'll notice your phone buzz, and you won't feel an instant wave of panic. Not because life became predictable, because your nervous system finally stopped treating every unknown as an emergency. That's what freedom actually looks like, not the absence of uncertainty, the absence of constant fear. So the next time your mind tells you, what if everything goes wrong? Try asking a different question. What if my brain is remembering instead of predicting? That single question creates space. Space between you and the story your survival instincts have been telling for years. Because the truth is, you are not the frightened version of yourself that your brain keeps trying to protect. You are the person who survived enough to make your brain believe protection had to become permanent. And if your brain was capable of learning fear, it is also capable of learning safety. Slowly, patiently, one ordinary moment at a time. Maybe that's the most hopeful thing about being human. The brain that convinced you every shadow was a threat is the very same brain that can one day look at that same shadow and simply keep walking. Because real peace doesn't begin when the world finally feels safe. It begins the moment your mind realizes
It doesn't have to treat every heartbeat like a warning.